Hello everyone, and welcome back. I'm Rav Mo, and this is episode 9 of It Begins With Us. We're looking for those deep, meaningful, and relevant passages that can be found in the opening chapters of the Torah. Last time we spoke about what does it mean to truly produce fruit in our lives. That our lives are judged not by what we are right now, but the things that we perpetuate on into the future, and whether they remain healthy and honest and upright even after we're gone. And not only that, but the only fruits that we can actually say that we have owned and produced in this world are the mitzvahs, the good deeds that we have. Those are the only things we can take with us. Today, we're going to move on to day number 4. And this is very exciting because we're going to get into a little bit of a discussion as we talk about the creation of the great luminaries in the sky. We're going to talk about what does it mean to have a healthy self-esteem, an unhealthy self-esteem, and how simply the best thing could be to get out of our own way. So, by way of introduction, let's read some of the passages. Now it talks about how it created all of the luminaries in the sky. And we're going to focus on the creation of the sun and the moon. So it says, Vayas Elokim es shnei ha'ma'oros ha'gedolim. And God made the 2 great luminaries. Es ha'ma'or ha'gadol, L'memshelas hayom, the great luminary to rule over the day, v'es ha'ma'or ha'katon, and the small luminary, L'memshelas halayla, to rule over the night, v'es ha'kochavim, and the stars. And of course, the daytime luminary was the sun, and the nighttime luminary was the moon. However, Rashi, by way of the Midrash, the oral Torah, tells us that there's something a little bit bizarre going on. If we notice in the language, there's an inconsistency. At first it said that God created the 2 great, gadol, luminaries. And then when it lists them, it says there's the great one, the gadol, during the day, and then there's the small one, the katan, at night. So wait a minute, were they both great ones? Or was only one great and one was small? So Rashi tells us, based on the Midrash, that there was, so to speak, a metaphorical conversation going on. When God created the sun and the moon steps forward and said, hold on a second. You cannot have 2 kings sharing the same crown. Which one of us is the ruler here? So God says, okay, fine. You can't have 2 kings sharing the same crown. So he originally had the sun and the moon being of equal size. But then he lessened the size of the moon because the moon itself brought forward the argument that you cannot indeed have 2 equal kings running and ruling over the night and the daytime sky. Okay, anytime there's some anthropomorphism of inanimate objects, there is clearly a message to be learned here. We're not supposed to take this literally that the sun and the moon were having an argument. So what is this telling us? Well, if we understand the relationship of the sun and the moon, we can say that the sun is that which is the source of light, and the moon has no light of its own. It only reflects the light of the sun. So what are we saying here? In the original intent of the creation of the world, God wanted it to be such that that which gives off light is perfectly received by that which reflects light. It reflects as much as it is reflected into. In other words, God, who is the source of all things, is giving light, wisdom, and beauty into the world, and we down here are supposed to reflect that light to the same extent as it has been given to us. There's only one problem. That which receives said, I'm sorry, but aren't we both rulers here? What's going on? At the moment that the receiver says that it can also be a king, that's the moment when God says, I see that you're not capable of reflecting the amount of light that I have to give you. Oftentimes, we as human beings forget the fact that the things that are most successful about ourselves are not coming directly from us. They're coming through us. There was a great Hollywood screenwriter who happened to be a religious person, and he used to make a blessing to himself every time he sat down to write. He said, God, please let it be that when I write, I'm not writing anything. I want all the writing to come from you. Because anytime I write something, it's no good. But if you're writing through me, then it's excellent. Sometimes the greatest things that we can do, the way to achieve the most success, is to recognize that it's not coming from us ourselves, but that it's rather coming through us. There was a great novelist named Elizabeth Gilbert who wrote a very famous book called Eat, Pray, Love, and she said that this idea that artists and musicians have to be the source of their own creativity all the time is potentially what drives them to alcohol, drugs, and even suicide. The saving grace is when an artist and a musician realizes that there is something that speaks through them, that's giving them all of their brilliant ideas. All we have to do is receive. We are not the sun, we're only the moon. And so, if we recognize that we're the moon, if we recognize that there is a king and we are not that king, then we can in fact reflect every bit as much of that light that is being reflected onto us. But if we mistakenly think that we're the king, then all of a sudden we must be made smaller, because it's actually unhealthy and dangerous for us to think that we are the source of our own creativity and success. We end up cutting off the flow that's coming through us. There was once a burgeoning electric car company in Israel, of all places, over a decade before Tesla ever came onto the scene, and it was called A Better Place. And you would actually see in the mid-2000s electric cars being driven around Israel. And people thought, this is amazing. What an incredible prototype to be able to share with the rest of the world. But alas, the company's founder allowed the success to get to his head, and he was more interested in winning awards and accolades as Innovator of the Year than he was about running a company. See, what he should have realized as CEO is that he's not the king. He's the person who's receiving all of that light, all of that success, and all of that innovation. And if he had shared it with his company and said, I'm not the one in charge here, and I'm not the guy who's supposed to be in front of the camera, then he would have allowed himself to receive that success and grow his company even greater. But as soon as he wanted to be the king, as soon as he wanted to be in the limelight, then he cut that all off for himself. He said, I'm a king just like the source of that light itself. And that's the moment where you're reduced in size, where you become like the moon who has to shrink just a little bit to be reminded that you are not the king. My friends, sometimes the greatest thing that we can do for our own lives, for our own success, for our own creative output, is to recognize that we're not the king. We are not the source of light. We are merely reflecting the light that is shining upon us. It's a beautiful way of expressing the sense of ego nullification, to say that it's not about me and I'm not the one who created it. At that moment, paradoxically, we become greater people, we become brighter people, we become more powerful people. And that's why our sages say that the person who is most honored and respected is the person who runs away from honor and respect. Live a life of honor and respect. Live a life that is as great as a king, but only by realizing that we ourselves are not the king. Have a wonderful time and a wonderful life. I'm glad you came to watch and listen. Hope you'll come back next time.